Despite her youth and beauty, our speaker today has a long, illustrious career in public service. Began with the City Council when we served together back in the 80s. She went on to be a member of the Florida House of Representatives and was kind enough to give that seat up to a dynamic young up-and-coming legislator who followed her. She's gone on from there to continue her service to community, both in volunteer roles as well as local government, where she serves currently with the Emerald Coast Utilities Authority. She ran for mayor once, ran against having that, what would you call it, toilet in our living room out down on the bayfront, and much of her dreams in that regard have come true. Please welcome my friend and neighbor, Lois Benson.
Well, it's great to be back at downtown Rotary. I send regards from Holly. She's in St. Louis, and she told me to say hello to her former club. She says to hold a place for her. She will be back. And thank you, Jerry, for inviting me today. Much of what I've learned in politics, I learned from Jerry Maygarden. Well, Jerry and WD. Jerry is a true leader, a gifted speaker, so I'm a little intimidated at being on this podium with him, and a silver-tongued orator. Speaking of which, I read in the news journal about Sheriff Morgan's remarks last week. Since I deal in sewage and garbage, I figured you probably had a theme going on, something about how politicians should handle human waste. I'm going to try to make my comments more palatable. The ECUA, thank you. The ECUA flies under the media radar most of the time, but we found it ourselves in the headlines recently. And I will tell you, I prefer to make a speech using an outline and speaking more extemporaneously. But there's a lot of what I'm saying that could be future litigation. So I've written out my remarks, and I apologize in advance. They were reviewed by our attorney, who was suggesting changes up till about 45 minutes ago. So if you would bear with me with that. And now I find out that you take this, so I'm going to also have to guard my potty mouth. Anyway, I'm going to update you on two recent stories, starting with the fate of the Main Street sewage plant property. As you all recall, and I don't have to tell you about this, in 2004, Hurricane Ivan devastated our community, crippled the Main Street plant. When the floods proceeded, downtown was covered with raw sewage. I know, I stepped in it. With all of the pressing needs that we faced after that hurricane, trees down, homes lost, aerial views of this city that were solid blue, we gathered in the Civic Center, a huge group of people, and of that group assembled, 90% named moving the Main Street plant as the highest priority in our recovery. You know the rest. FEMA pitched in $150 million, state and local governments kicked in. We began the design and engineering phase. When we broke ground, the entire U.S. economy was in the tank. See, it's so hard to make a speech about sewage. So I'm going to try not to do that anymore. Anyway, bid after bid came in below projections. We were able to pump good, needed jobs into the local economy. In less than a decade, we went from it can't be done to wow, we did it. Accomplishing the impossible, defying gravity, pumping sewage uphill. In 2010, we began operating a new state-of-the-art water reclamation facility in northern Escambia County, ahead of schedule and under budget, which brings us to where we are today. When this community came together in 2004, our dream was not about eradicating an ugly, smelly plant in the heart of downtown. Our dream was about a blank slate on which to write our city's future, and we were well on our way. As of January of this year, the land was cleared, the DEP had given us an environmental green light. Everything had gone so well, we thought, clear it and they will come. We planted a for sale sign, for sale by owners, as a matter of fact, on the site. Et voila. In June, we were handed a contract for $7.6 million, the top of our appraisals. We knew virtually nothing about the buyer, no support materials. I pulled out all the stops of my eloquence, said something about not kissing the first frog I met in hopes that he would turn into a prince. Anyway, the offer was rejected by a narrow margin of 3-2. Then, 2 days before our July meeting, we were handed another contract from the same guy. We heard about, but didn't see a conceptual design his broker had shown the city, and they thought it was great, they said. Our packet did include 3 articles, puff pieces really, about 3 projects that H.T. Lamb Company had launched in Houston. The most recent one was a decade old. There was no financial information to show capacity to close. I kind of wondered, where's the beef? Instead of dollar signs, I saw red flags. Here we had a boilerplate purchase agreement, something you could get right off the internet. The whole story was told in the addendums, which were all about how he would proceed to get his binder back. Everything, to me, seemed to point to someone who either wanted a free look or intended to sit on the property and flip it when the economy improved. At best, we would lose 6 months and get a black mark on our marketing. At worst, we would be gazing at 20 weed-infested acres in downtown for the foreseeable future. I called friends. I solicited inputs from attorneys, developers, brokers, people whom I respected, and I fielded a lot of calls. We only had 2 days, remember, from constituents, not just the downtown crowd. People called. A lady from Myrtle Grove said, "Don't do it. This is crazy." A young guy from Perdidos told me what he had found on the internet. But everyone said the same thing. But Bob Montgomery said it best. "Lois," he said, "this is nuts." Why, I wondered, would we hand the keys to our city's future to someone who didn't even bother to show up, much less share his vision? I offered my oratorical best shot at swaying my colleagues. Of course, I didn't learn much theory. When the vote was called and the screen lit up, I was outvoted 4-1. Now, I will tell you, in defense of my fellow board members, that this was a top dollar offer. We might not see another one that high. The other board members wanted to be good stewards to get the best return on the ratepayers' investment. And Mr. Sorrell, who is well respected by the board, strongly recommended approval. And they might know what happens if you vote against his recommendation. Ask me about that later. Anyway, the rest of the story unfolded over the next few days with some good investigative reporting by Nate Monroe. He had already tipped us that the beautiful conceptual drawings that had been prepared by Bullock Tice had not been prepared by the broker, but were the buyer, but were commissioned by the broker. It was a what-if scenario, but it got worse. Shannon Nickinson called those journalists who had written the puff pieces, and they said, "Oh gosh, we haven't heard from this guy in years." Then Nate fleshed out our invisible man, felony charges and all, on the front page. When the deadline came for the contract to be signed, Mr. Weezy was once again, not surprisingly, a no-show. So, we get a do-over. We have now contracted with the Halford Company to market the property, and I can once again dream. I believe any plan for this site should include an economic engine, not just houses, but an engine to create jobs and to spread the downtown renaissance across the west side and up into Belmont to Villers and beyond. I believe it needs to have a mix of housing and other uses to attract a cross-section of people, young families, teachers, veterans, retirees, to live, work, and play downtown. But there's another problem looming. This property is zoned for industrial uses. A cement plant, a garbage transfer station, a paper mill. Now, wouldn't that be something? Rather than simply downzoning from the manufacturing zoning, to prevent noxious uses, the city has proposed an overlay district that prescribes the use of the property so narrowly. It says that every residential unit should have front porches, and it says what size, that they be open air. Never mind that they will be 14 feet above Main Street because it's in a floodplain. The design criteria are so narrowly drawn in 6 single-space pages of agonizing specificity, and it doesn't even provide an appeal to the city council for variances. While I understand and agree with the impetus for this ordinance, this rigid formula could stymie our marketing. Any top-tier buyer would certainly have a creative team to study the costs and feasibilities and to develop a vision for this property. Faced with this level of red tape and this many must-dos, prospects may just turn away. Find another good tale. We may be left with the same outcome I feared for Mr. Weezy. Denise Daughtry might be parking cars at $5 a pop for Wahoos fans on our vacant land for the foreseeable future. This ordinance is going to come before the City Council on Thursday night. I urge you to weigh in. Ask them to put it off to give us a chance to work together to find something that we feel that we can work with in our market. Now, the other issue. The ECUA may be poised to take a giant step in recycling if we don't get tripped. In 2008, the county announced huge spikes in our disposal fees. The ECUA had to either raise our rates or get creative. We're politicians, after all, we chose the latter. And in 2009, we embarked on curbside recycling. People told me that people in this community will not recycle, which is not that progressive. Well, it turns out it wasn't true. Voluntary recycling since that time has grown beyond our wildest projections. Well over 50% of the families in this community now recycle. They sort, they put into their separate cans, and in so doing, they're helping expand the markets for recyclables. We now offer curbside recycling of everything from paper to plastics to pool chemicals, batteries, fluorescent bulbs, tires, and we pick them up at your home. Perhaps the biggest boon to recycling, however, was when we announced that we were going to take pizza boxes. It appears that this county actually runs on pizza. Anyway, despite the fact that our tipping fees have gone up by 41% since 2007, we've been able to cap our increases to 1.7%, and our rates for many of you who live in the city are lower than those of city sanitation. Now, Escambia County has been a good steward, by the way. They run a modern landfill. Their staff even ran a landfill camp for kids there this summer. And that sounds like fun. Commissioner Robinson points to their program to capture methane gases, which they sell to Gulf Power, and he's proud of it, and he should be. It's a great program. But with new technologies which are displacing county dumps, which are now becoming dinosaurs of solid waste, in 20 years, even state-of-the-art landfills will have gone the way of drive-in movies and LP records. The state of Florida has mandated that counties develop plans and set aside funds to phase out landfills. The ECUA is getting green. We keep looking for ways to recover more recyclables and materials that are now disposed in the landfill. And so, we began negotiating with West Florida Recycling, which is the company that handles all of our, they process and market our recycled waste stream, and with their parent company, Rainbow, who is a leader in recycling in California. They have developed a clean process for recovering materials from waste. First, they filter out metals and other recyclables. Then they shred the remainder, add a substance, and in the end, they have pellets or fluff, depending on the end user, which is refuse-derived fuel, which is used as energy. Plastic bags, which are the bane of landfills, are actually ideal for creating RDF because of their high BTU value. It's a clean, award-winning process. There's no incineration. Their California facility is directly across from an elementary school, and they're a good neighbor, located in the heart of downtown Huntington Beach. And don't even think about the Main Street site. This spring, the ECUA voted to contract with West Florida Recycling to process our entire waste stream and to convert 95% of everything we throw away, that's not just the sorted stuff, but everything, into usable fuel. What's not to love? Turns out a couple of things. First, we're on a collision course with the county. As the largest customer of the Perdido landfill, ECUA's tipping fees pay for several county operations beyond waste disposal. If we divert 95% of our waste stream, they would face huge budget shortfalls. I sincerely hope that Grover and I can resume our dialogue and find an amicable solution that will address their budget concerns and still be able to convert our community's waste into fuel, creating jobs, saving money. But I fear we might be headed to the courts. The second, more graphic issue are the conditions at West Florida Recycling. They are actually victims of their own success and our enthusiasm for recycling. They're bursting at the seams. They're in a dispute with their landlord over a faulty retention pond and have been reprimanded by DEP. The summer of floods has not helped. They want to upgrade, but their efforts to get permits for a new building have been blocked. If they cannot get a permit and cannot move their operation, we will find that more and more of the stuff that you and I sort, hoping to reuse it, will end up in a landfill because the processor is out of space and out of options. Imagine the headlines: recycler canned. But just because this story hit before this story hit the news, I was shown some really disgusting pictures taken at West Florida Recycling. I immediately scheduled a tour. And what I saw wasn't pretty. Mountains of the stuff that we as a society discard. We don't fold it. We don't deodorize it before we toss it. Think about your trash can on steroids. I went in and I watched the sorting process, and they had a conveyor belt. I was reminded of I Love Lucy, and I think some of you are old enough to remember the chocolate scenes. Yeah, these were not chocolates. There was a tangled mass from hundreds of blue bins, plastic bags, newspapers, hard plastics, cans, and unidentifiable ick, which is then manually resorted. It is almost entirely manually done. One guy in particular was kind of like the Olympic athlete when it came to sorting. His arms flew around amazingly fast. He took the jumbled mess and separated, sorted, tossed, and the other employees talked about him in hushed tones, sort of a sorting superstar, macho. But what emerged from this litter of plastic bags, broken vacuum cleaners, garden hose, cans and more cans were bales of processed material ready for market. Outside there was a line of trucks loaded with crushed cans, more trucks loaded with compressed paper headed for Atlanta. I remember thinking then that if Disney were in charge of our recycling, it would be a lot prettier, but we couldn't afford it. But what I also saw was an entrepreneur creating jobs, making payrolls well above minimum wage, poised to create more jobs if he gets permission. I don't know if West Florida Recycling can dig out from under this mess, but I do know that I, for one, am cheering them on. If they can't, someone else should. In my heart, I'm a free market kind of gal, but why not let ECUA do it? Commission will say we don't have the legal right, maybe. Well, maybe a joint venture. Governments working together instead of suing each other. I can dream. Today, we know that 95% of what we throw out can be converted to fuel instead of lingering in the landfill in perpetuity. Now that we've seen Oz, do we really want to go back to Kansas? This community has made giant leaps, defying gravity, moving sewage uphill and moving the new plant. Let's finish the job right. And we've proved that people in this town will indeed embrace recycling. Let's take the next step. Let's welcome technologies that are already tested and proven. Let's recover and reuse, create jobs, and put our community on the map as one of the great progressive communities in the Southeast. In closing, yesterday I scanned my favorite source for cutting-edge news, Facebook, and I scrolled down through dozens of shots of kids on their first day of school. You saw them too. Fresh haircuts, new shoes, Virgin backpacks. For just one day, every kid's an A student. Whether we're writing the next chapter on downtown or embracing technologies to turn our trash into fuel, we have a rare opportunity, a fresh start. Let's seize it.
How can you know the cost of transportation and additional time when you do not know the location where the trash is?
Well, obviously, any new venture, you make estimates based on your best knowledge, and that's what we did. And actually, there is another site in Pensacola to which they'd like to move just to do the operations they're doing right now, and they're facing some obstacles in that. So that was really the site I was talking about. But yeah, that's one of the what ifs, and that's why we need to be working together.
You mentioned,
You want to call?
No, sorry.
Okay.
Next question.
Alexis.
you mentioned the rezoning, redistricting, and the rules and regs put on the old school on property.
Yes.
Would seem to be, from what you say, too restrictive to get somebody in here to do some developing. What do you, as citizens of the city and the county, do to encourage the city or whoever's making these decisions to loosen up a little bit and yet regulate so that we don't have to take a mill on the property?
She asked about what you as citizens can do about the extreme regulations that I described that are going before the city council in their overlay district. Call your council members. I don't think any of us want some of those noxious uses that could be done under the current zoning. If they simply downzone, that would help. The truth is, anybody buying that property is not going to put a paper mill there. It's not going to put a transfer station. But if they're concerned about a downzoning, we'll do the trick. If they want to go farther, let us have a dialogue about what can and can't be lived with. Talk to our brokers, talk to real estate professionals who know what will entice good developers, not turn them away. But starting with calls to the city council and meetings Thursday night.
Lois, two questions. Number one, has ECUA made any proposal to the city as far as the zoning issue? And number two is, I understand that ECUA put a FISBO out there, but then changed it to Halbert, which is fine. But what about a national search? What efforts, if any, have been made on a national basis to attract someone to come in and do revitalization for not only that site, but downtown?
Thank you, Alan. He asked first about whether we're talking to the city, and the answer to that is yes. We are talking with them, and we're hoping to get a 90-day or at least a 60-day period in which to continue those dialogues. Second, the for sale by owner sign I thought was a mistake. This needs to be marketed by professionals who have the ability to outreach nationally. Our contract with the Halford Company does include that component. We don't expect there's someone sitting in here who is sitting on an offer, although it could be, you know. But I will tell you something funny. You know, when you do real estate contracts with brokers, there are often set-asides. You know, that is, if you've been working with someone, you carve them out so you don't have to pay a commission on them. We actually have a set-aside for HT Land Company, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Good questions.
I actually have one. Comment on that story from the environmental group about the quality of the water.
Thank you.
It continues to pop up. I wonder how aggressive the CMA is beating that down.
Yeah, we're not aggressive enough, and thank you for that. It pops up, this is the story that says Pensacola is one of the 10 worst cities in terms of drinking water in the United States. And I have been fielding calls and emails about that for 3 years, I think. This is an organization, sort of an extreme environmental organization who wants to change the Clean Water Act. And they're using this as a method to do that. We went to UWF and commissioned a study and said, is this true? Look at our drinking water, is it one of the worst? And they told us that what this paper was absolutely bogus science. It was not peer-reviewed. No one signed it. It was not authored by a reliable scientist. And their methodology was definitely suspect. The problem is, it's hard to spread good news. Bad news is like wildfire. But something, you know, telling somebody this wasn't peer-reviewed just doesn't catch on Facebook, unfortunately. Well, let me tell you one other funny thing. I said something about needing to go along with staff recommendation. A week after I went against the staff recommendation and voted against this contract, my housekeeper called down to me and said, "Lois, your car's been hit." Now, I was parked in front of my house on a one-way street down Zaragoza next to Jerry's house. And there were a couple cars parked behind me. An ECUA truck had come and passed both of those other cars and then swerved in and smashed my car. I guess it's our comparable to the Yellow Canary, so I'm going to do a lot better in the future. Thank you.
Lois, let me give you this 5 pieces of time to thank the community. I appreciate your service to the community. We're also donating a book, which is our custom, Eating the Alphabet, Fruits and Vegetables from A to Z. That's what we read. One of our local schools. If you've done your honor, we'll sign these. Thank you.